We do have some questions that have come in, and I thought that I would just begin
Yes, please.
with some thoughts that I had and some of the questions that have come in. I particularly wanted to begin with the comment you made with the World Economic Forum study that you've jumped 10 points. And I'm sure that many, many countries are quite jealous that you have actually made that kind of a jump. Can you tell us specifically what it is that you have done that has allowed you to make that jump in the competitiveness in terms of the economy?
I don't know if I can speak on behalf of the respondents of that particular survey, but the things that we've been trying to do, look at that situation where I was talking about with regards to the NFA. There is a need to have a constant, to have food security, and the shortage in our rice output has always been addressed by importations. Now, the illogic comes in when you import double of what you need, and precisely doubling also the cost because it will not be bought, and you would not need, amongst other things, warehousing for it. How do you explain the growth of a debt from 12 billion to 177 billion if it were run reasonably well? Now, then there's so many other projects that one of them entailed an expenditure of 18.7 billion. And at the end of the day, the only thing that would happen would be to play with mud. So what we're trying to do basically is ensure that, like any other country, we have issues with the money that we need to spend to grow the economy. We inherited a projected 325 billion deficit that we managed to trim to about 317, even given the fact that most of the budget had already been spent by the time we got into office. This year, we're projected to have 300 billion. We're actually at 48 billion. But there are already complaints that we're not spending enough. So we are attending to that. But it really is... It was something I thought I'd never hear. Because I started in public office and the litany was always, we don't have funds. Now we're saying we have to spend more if we are to nurture the growth of the economy. But I guess more and more people are really seeing the changes of the Philippines being open for business under new management and what it actually entails. And we'd like to think that this is more sound decisions are being made. There is only one agenda, and that is improving our people's lives. And we can see providing an environment for various business entities that where the rules are clear, where there's a level playing field, and where their only risk really is commercial risk. That they should have expertise in addressing, really redounds to opportunities for all of us to grow. And I think that's the recognition.
And the fact that you've done it in such a short time.
Well, I'd like to say we did it in such a short time. To include the people who have been reporting various things that have made the governance that much better. The website has resulted in leads that showed us people who would not want to join us in the straight and narrow path. There are instances where our attention is called to projects that perhaps could have been reevaluated, roads that were rebuilt that were actually in good condition, things like that. So the citizenry, together with government, has really empowered everybody. There are more opportunities existing now than a year before. But of course, none of us are content. There has to be a transformation that will be difficult to backslide from by the time we step down in 4 years and 9 months.
Exactly. This is terrific. But at the rate you're going, I think that I would love to have you come every year, and we will do this report card, and we'll see where we are. To change the subject slightly, and you mentioned, in fact, the Spratly Islands, Western Philippines, and your relationship to China. When it comes to that question of the dispute, what would you like to have U.S. do specifically? And can you shed light on your recent conversations in Beijing as to how we move this issue forward?
Well, when you want to achieve an agreement, I was taught by the school that I went to, by my parents, that you have to situate yourself in the position of the other individual. And in their particular case, the concept of saving face is such an important thing. You have a transition that will happen in about 2 years. You have their declaration in 2009 of the 9-dash policy. they have the same declaration also of adhering to international law, which in our case we believe UNCLOS is the attendant law and the relevant law, which is incompatible with their 9-dash position. So they will, we think that they will be reasonable, but they also need to have some means that their face is preserved. So we are trying to achieve that dialogue. We have agreed to segregate certain issues, those that are under dispute and those that are not disputed. And what should the West do? I understand something like, well, there's major trade that traverses this body of water. It is in everybody's interest that it doesn't become the Mare Nostrum of whichever entity. There has to be that freedom of navigation that should happen.
And ASEAN has made this point to U.S. as well, yes.
Yes, and that's why we think that the only way to solve it is to engage all those who have claims on it on a multilateral basis with the CN centrality. Because if we do it on a bilateral basis, we will just be exaggerating and exacerbating the problem of competing claims.
And have the Chinese agreed on this multilateral frame?
Well, at least the agreement is that we will try to actualize the declaration of the Code of Conduct. Because there is a stated principle, but there is no implementing rules, or there are no implementing rules and regulations for it.
No. There's a question from one of our guests who had written from the online side, and this is a young student who is a Filipina. And she says that as a Filipino student here in the U.S., I feel very fortunate to benefit from the U.S.'s stellar academic institutions. Is your administration actively seeking to expand opportunities for other Filipinos to come to the U.S. as students, or for U.S. academic institutions to have a greater role in expanding their presence in the Philippines?
There is a certain amount of capacities or capabilities that our institutions should have before that becomes, before we maximize the potentials of that intended course of action. What do I mean? There are a lot of institutions, for instance, that cater to whatever the hottest course is. And what happens is there's always a mismatch between the skills that are being imparted on our students versus the reality of the job market. So the first thing that we had to do was one call into line various entities that jumped on, for instance, the nursing bandwagon, who sought to develop a faculty by pirating from the established institutions that diminished their capabilities to produce good nurses. We're trying to redirect our students to courses by means of labor forecasting, areas where there are greater potentials. We will be closing down schools that have not been producing or developing the skills necessary for the students to pass various board exams. And then we're trying to rationalize the resources that go into the state universities and colleges. There is, how should I put it, a monument building fixation with certain elements of our political leadership.
And you would not be alone. Many countries have that. Yes.
But you have so many universities that cannibalize faculties of various established universities already that diminish the resources available for each one. So instead of an improvement in the capabilities and capacities, you have a continual diminution of their ability to impart the necessary skills. So we'll stop that hemorrhaging, and then once you have the concentrations of all of these facilities, resources, then we can add to that, especially with the growing economy.
So you feel that getting outside universities to come in is not the first priority, but to really clean house, get the house in order before you open it up.
Well,
is that correct?
Yes, I think that would be the more prudent strategy. If we get cooperators who find that it's a waste of their time to come to us, then we induce donor fatigue rather too early. Right. But there are some institutions that are ready to accept this and already have partnerships undergoing in the private sector. But we are in the public sector that has to deal first with the state universities and colleges.
Right. Thank you. This question is around birth control policies. What is the policy of the current government towards birth control, many people have blamed the high birth rate and lack of birth control for the persistent poverty affecting the masses of the Philippine people. And obviously, there are religious issues as well. How is your government tackling that?
Well, perhaps I can use two anecdotal stories to illustrate how I look at the problem. I have a member of my security detail back home who 3 days before enrolling his firstborn in college tells me it's expensive to send somebody to college. Then I told him, my initial reaction and immediate reaction was, you had 17 years to think about the tuition that you will have to pay for your firstborn. Why is it that you started thinking about it 3 days before enrolling your son? And that was the first of his brood of 8. Anyway, then there was one is a little bit sadder. Secretary Diggo Suliman, who's present here, and I went to a place called the Baseco compound in the city of Manila. We